Most people in life are trying to figure out how do I make a life worth living and retirement happy. You can see that I'm literally on holiday. I'm taking my time to put life back together after losses. The losses in my life are professional and personal, and I've shared a little bit of that story out online in YouTube. The problem is that the hazers and the harassers and the stalkers and the cybercrime folks who've been attacking my life haven't literally stopped. So every time I put together an incredibly good sermon video for my new venture in life with Life Force Ministries, someone deletes it off YouTube. I haven't allowed anyone to take my passcodes or to have copies of those, but there was a little girl who stole my pack when she gave me a lift in town, and those passcodes never came back with other things that were returned to me by the local law. And I'm pretty sure they were involved in this, but that's okay. All I can say is that Blake Ensign, which is me, is being hazed, harassed, and stalked. And I know this for a fact because I literally put things away in a certain way, and the next morning I wake up and find they're not the same way that I left them. I also find that I throw things away in the trash that I don't need any longer, and those items end up back in my bag. It makes no sense. It's a childish game, but that's my life. Now, when we talk about real life, we're talking about real opportunities. When I was working in my marketing business a while ago, I would help people with the spirit of their company. My 12-week program literally focused on helping people to capture the language that they say naturally in talking about what they do. See, so many times people are not marketers. They are not literally linguists. They are not journalists. They are not reporters thinking about how they sound to clients. They're thinking about what they want to say to people, but they're not always using their natural speech patterns and their natural vocabulary to do so. The advantage of being a marketer like me, who's got a little trained journalist background, is that I listen very carefully. And I literally hear how people say things, and I stop them and say, that's really your tagline right there. That thing you keep saying naturally, that you're not ever using, that's really it right there. That mantra you just shared, that ideology you just had, your vision, mission, and values, the statements that you naturally say to me when we're talking informally are precisely what you need to utilize to market your business and your brand. When people get that information, they start to make strides. They start to improve. They literally start to get more interest in what they do. There's a lot of different ways to market yourself. We had one gal who literally, we wrote a little jingle for, and she sang her 60-second commercial. It got people's attention. She got a lot of fun out of doing it. I don't know if she literally still does it. She might have given up on it because so many people had heard it so many times. Or maybe she started to write her own jingles, which would be wise, to literally keep growing off of something that worked for a little while. In life, we have moments of time to say, hey, I kind of like what you're doing. I kind of like that you're living on the out loud and proud and large life. But here's the challenge. We have a lot of people in this land who want to take away opportunities from others. They have, jealousy, they have rage, they have ideology that says, I'm too immature to speak with you in person, but I'm going to pick up the phone and talk to a total stranger about your life and tell them my opinion about what I think is going on between us. I literally have had that happen recently, and it was sort of odd that I was trying to literally talk to a legal heir of mine to say, I'm not feeling well. I need to give you some things so that you're prepared. But instead of saying, oh, thank you, what a gracious gift, what a loving thing for someone who loves me to do, that individual literally hung up the phone, or someone hung up the phone for her. Then I had some total stranger telling me that I was not allowed to talk to that individual on the phone because of X, Y, and Z, and I thought, who the heck is this guy who's a manager in a restaurant trying to tell me what I can and can't do with my own legacy? Now, I can give you that story, and I can say, I don't know what's going on with my legal heir's life. I can't say that I know. All I can say is that the woman that I chose to leave things to is supposed to be a mature, financially astute individual, and that's why I literally chose her. Now, in your life, you have your own paperwork, your own personhood, your own property, which you have to manage. And when we lose things because of loss of a life partner, you're never quite the same. In your life, have you ever lost a love interest? Do you remember what that was like? Do you remember how much it had a pain in your soul? Do you remember what it felt like to wake up and look over at that pillow and go, where is she now? Or where is he now, if you're on the other side of the coin? But the reality is, people don't think about that much. We do have churches now that are starting, just little by little, maybe it's because I read my book, to say we need some groups that talk about loss. But the reality is that most people are really living beyond their means. And what I mean by beyond their means, that they're not of the old school like my late father, who would say, we've got to make a budget, and this is how you separate things out. This is what you live on, this is what you tithe, and this is what you put away for retirement. Most of us don't have the luxury of that because we're working so hard just to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads, or car payments paid. And with gas prices the way they are, we've got to deal with that too. In life, you don't really recognize what's going on in a community or within a group of people or a population if you're not really out walking around, talking to people. I think that's one of the things I admire about politicians, that they literally have to do the legwork. They have to have their team who represents them really well, and if they don't, they're foolish. But literally going out and listening to people, talking to people, hearing their life stories, gathering it up and going, okay, now that I have this really unique story to utilize as an example, how do I utilize it in a confidential way so that I'm not disclosing information that I earned through trust building and becoming a trusted advisor, to share in a way that makes sense to the rest of the people who are going to hear this story? You see, we can get our head all in a knot over things that don't affect us. We can literally think that we have the right to put a play on someone else's life or lie on someone else's life because somebody told us that we should do this because of XYZ. The truth is, if we've never met that individual, if we've never talked to that stranger, if we've never really sat down and had a meal with them and really gotten to know them as a really unique individual that the Lord has made, we have no way to know that what we've been told is true or not. And that's the bottom line, that people gossip, and gossip kills lives. Now, as a pastor, I'm pretty passionate about this. I have a sister who say, nobody likes the way you talk to them. Right, and yet they do that regularly. You see, in life, they are responsible for their own individual lives, and if they have children under age 18, then possibly for their lives too. Now, parents often tend their children into the adult years. They literally continue to grow old, just as we as children grow old, and we have those relationships. If the relationship between a parent and child is not good, it's not going to remain good throughout the entire lifetime of that relationship. And sometimes children and parents just say, you know what, you make me feel so bad in life, I'm just not going to pay any more attention to you. You've got other children that you love more than me, then go right ahead and be all you can be for them in their lives. Sit down and have those little talks and share your story in your life and tell them how you're feeling and tell them what aches and pains you have, and you let the other children manage your life. But when it comes time to loving people, when it comes time to loving God, we have to look at our liabilities to the Lord. Now, when I talk about liabilities to the Lord, I'm talking about how do people explain their lives in front of a God in heaven. If you're a believer, we know that works don't get us to heaven alone. We know that only through Christ we get there. In other religions, they have a slightly different version of that story. They look at Jesus as a prophet, and some of them don't acknowledge him at all, which is a shame, because he's a pretty powerful magician if you recognize the stories of his magic and magic in the house of the Lord. What we know from the Bible is that the house of the Lord has many rooms. We've had that passage in our midst forever, yet pastors don't really talk about it enough. They're so busy judging other people. They're so busy putting plays on other people. They're so busy trying to play one-upsmen with things that they forget some of the old-time rituals of being literally a priest. Now, sometimes people call me the parkside priest because I like to sit in the park. I like to eat my lunch here. I sometimes like to eat my dinner here. And openly, it's a peaceful place. When you have no place to go and there's a rainstorm, about the only place you can find that's not getting rain underneath the awning is in a park, if you're lucky. Sure, there are some storms that don't quite make it, meaning that they will blow through no matter where you are. But in life, there are storms in life. There are storms that people endure in life. And literally, I've been to many places that are supposed to help when you have storms in life. And what I've found is that those people might help you one time, but then they try to get into a power and control in your life that's not right. I have one organization that has helped me to pay for a mailbox, and yet all of a sudden, after 1 month, maybe 2 of them paying, now I'm getting a bill saying I owe money somehow. Did that organization call me to tell me that they've taken the money away? I don't think so. It was a 6-month renewal. So why is it that I'm getting a notice now? And openly, there are other organizations that when I walk in the door, the woman comes out with her hands on her hip like I'm somehow bothering her. No, I literally just didn't have enough money for food for the day. I apologize. You have an entire stockhouse of food that's been donated and that's expiring because you're not giving it out. Would you mind giving me a can or two? Now, what I'm talking about are simple, real truths of what it's like to be literally homeless in a community. But people don't want to hear about homelessness because it makes them nervous about their own lives. And why does it make them nervous about their own lives? Because every single human being knows how important employment is, how important a viable business is, and how important it is to have honest and truthfulness being said about ourselves and about our names. When people get into the habit of lying about people, and I've literally seen it now regularly in a particular industry, which makes me want to vomit. It literally makes me think this is why Jesus went through what he went through, because those people who did that to him didn't care about his life force, didn't care about his love, didn't care about the peace in his soul. They didn't care about that in 1 second. The people that are literally stealing me blind from my storage unit don't care one moment about the fact that God is looking down at them in heaven going, why are you stealing from my child? Now, we go back to the concept of homelessness for those who are willing to continue to listen, and this whole audio is going way too long, and I'll probably have to start all over again. But in life, we've got to look at, how do I help a homeless person? Well, the first thing is that your church should have a little bitty food bank. It'll cost your church maybe $50 to have some practical things on hand. When you put practical things on hand, you have to look at, how do I feed a person that has no stove, no refrigerator, no way to cart possibly the food? If they're fortunate they have a car, but what if they don't? So we have to think in terms of small things. We have to think in terms of a singular meal, because usually families who are homeless find a way to put their children someplace to be safe with other families for a little while, and most families will allow a child to stay who's going through a struggle. But for the adults, it's a harsher look. It's not the same love that goes out of people's minds to think, you may stay here as long as you like. I've only known one woman to do that, and I'm sure it impacted her marriage. That she allowed a family to stay with her that she wasn't even related to for like a year. I've got family members that won't even feed me for a day without insulting me through the process. They feed animals on their property. They feed chickens. They feed cats. They feed sheep. They feed dogs, 4 of them, before they would consider spending as much as they do on animal food on their little brother. Now, I'm not begrudging them. They have the right to make those decisions on their own finances, just as I have the right to make the decision on what I'm going to talk about. What we're talking about is how to produce a life worth living and retirement worth having. And the retirement part is what we all should be concerned with. Do we have literally enough in the bank to provide for ourselves when we're too old to work, too tired to get up and go, and literally might have some cellular degeneration that's going to cause us ailments and health problems? This is why I'm talking about these things. I want people to wake up and smell the coffee, or the bacon, or whatever it is you like to smell. It doesn't really matter. It could be sushi for all I care. But the reality is that we are usually 2 to 3 paychecks away from homelessness. If we lose a job, do you have enough money to sustain yourself for 6 months in the bank? A year. If you do, you've done a fabulous job. If you do, you've listened well to the elders of the word. If you do, you've done a great job living frugally. But most people don't. And this is what statistics tell us. This is what national statistics tell us, that most Americans are living beyond their means. And most pastors have all kinds of wealth tied up in their churches, literally complete empty spaces that could house a homeless family. They could literally give up one room in the place to let a family put sleeping bags on the floor and allow them to stay out of the rain, out of the storms of life. But do they do that? No. I was gifted some food today, but as I was allowed to very thoughtfully and very lovingly look through the food they had put together for the pantry, there was virtually nothing there that I could eat. You see, I don't have a stove. I don't have a refrigerator. I can't cook large portions. And most of the canned goods, honestly, looked like someone had just took them off their shelf of stuff they never used and put it in. I doubt they checked the dates. Lots of vegetables, lots of beans. People can't eat that much in that way. You see, when we're talking about homelessness, we have to really look at, how do I produce a complete meal for someone who's homeless? Now, that doesn't mean a PB&J sandwich and a snack bag of chips and a bottle of milk or whatever. But it does mean we have to think in terms of food groups. It means we need to think of, okay, the person needs a protein and a fruit and some sort of a salad item if possible. Which usually means something in a can. They need some canned tuna, they need some canned oranges, they need some canned pineapple, they need some canned pork, they need some canned beef, they need some canned ham, they need some canned wieners, right? Those little wieners that cost 50 cents a can or less at the store. It's not really hard to feed a homeless person a reasonable meal that doesn't require one stove or one refrigerator to do it. Even some condiment packets that are in date and kept in a cool, dry place would be allowed to be put into a sack, so that if someone walked into church and had no food and no money, you could literally pick up a small sack that had your little church's name on it for all we care, printed on it, and literally hand them a meal for the day, or 3 meals for the day, for less than $10. You see, it's never about whether or not the person can work or not. I had someone insult with something I said on LinkedIn saying that people just don't want the jobs. That's not true. People have to align their souls with the job in order to function in a job, in order to make sure that they're not harmed in a job, in order to make sure that their name goes on carefully in their career life. In life, we have moments of time to make all the difference in the world for someone. I've challenged one person in my life to make a difference, to stand up, to be counted before the house of God, and she still hasn't done it yet. Now, this has been Blake Ensign of Blaze Communications LLC, an Ode marketing company, and of Life Force Ministries that's just launching to literally talk to people, to groups, to business professionals about homelessness in the land. It's not a popular topic, but it's certainly worth looking at. We are literally sending thousands of dollars overseas to feed people in third world countries, yet we can't produce 1 ounce of compassion for the neighbors that live right around us. There's something wrong with that picture, folks. It's why we need new politicians in Washington. It's why I've got my support in for a couple of the women who are running for office. And openly, the guys are good too, but all they're doing is really repeating what their girls are saying. And sometimes they're doing a better job, but that's okay. It's literally time to have a different perspective in that house. There's nothing wrong with Trump. I'm sure he did a fine job in a lot of things, but we don't ever hear about the things he's succeeded in. Right now, all we hear about is the crap that he's allegedly doing to harm someone. How do we know that for real? All we know is that there's certain areas of our life that are private to us, and those things remain private to us only if the politicians in Washington regard our rights to privacy, regards our rights to the U.S. Constitution, regards our rights to the treaties of human rights, and the federal laws of civil liberties. Thanks for listening.